Today on Security and Compliance Weekly, we're chatting with Matt Tarr, who's a principal solutions engineer at today's sponsor, CyberArk. In our first segment, we'll learn a little bit about Matt, get his take on our hot seat question, of course, and Matt will then explain how CyberArk provides security for the heart of the enterprise by adding a layer of security around privileged accounts. In our second segment, we're going to discuss the overarching importance of securing privileged access throughout the organization as it relates to the overall security posture, as well as how to meet compliance requirements. Probably going to mention PCI somewhere along the way there. We also want to take some time to explore the principle of least privilege, need to know, and of course, we want to understand how CyberArk can help us with our security and compliance needs. All this on more as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. The average cost to respond to an insider threat is $11.45 million. That's a lot of reasons why a functional insider threat program must be a core part of any modern cybersecurity strategy. To protect your organization's sensitive data and meet compliance requirements, you need controls in place to deter, detect, and disrupt insider threats. With ECRAN system, you can meet control requirements imposed by compliance mandates all within one insider threat management platform. Get your free 30-day trial at securityweekly.com/ECRAN. That's EKRAN, and fulfill your compliance requirements. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to episode number 39 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on August 18th, 2020. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Scott Lyons, John Snyder, and I think Josh is hanging out. Well, he's there, but he's going to hang out mostly on the Discord server because he's at the beach and we're worried about his audio connection. So actually, we're just tired of hearing him talk, so he's just going to zip it, but he'll be hanging out and probably saying nice things about me on the Discord server. Before we jump into our discussion with Matt, I do have a few announcements. First, join the Security Weekly mailing list for webcast and virtual training announcements and to receive your personal invitation to our Discord server. You can do this by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe, clicking the button to join the list. Also, if you have specific guests or topic suggestions that you want us to cover on one of the shows, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting, believe it or not, securityweekly.com/guests and filling out the form. We review these suggestions on a monthly basis, and we'll reach out to you once we've reviewed your posting. I also want to add a personal announcement. I got a call just moments before we went on the air. My youngest daughter just gave birth to her very first child. So I am the new grandfather of a little baby girl named Emily Weaver. So Emily Weaver,
Yay.
Welcome to the world if you watch this 10 years from now when you actually want to see Grandpa on the air. So we're very excited in the Mann clan family. We've got grandchild number 4. So tough act to follow, I realize, Matt, but want to welcome you to Security and Compliance Weekly.
Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited about the conversation today.
Well, we're looking forward to it too. Starting off, we'd just like to get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into InfoSec and compliance, and how'd you find your way over to CyberArk?
Yeah. So it was really about demand. I think, right, is the biggest element to put me where I am today. And I've been with CyberArk for about 6 years, or going on 6 years. So I've been in the solutions engineering role my entire time with CyberArk. But prior to that, I was in networking, and a very specific space within networking, wireless networking. So back then, this was 2004, mid 2000s era. There was a ton of demand for wireless expertise, and it was something that networking professionals didn't carry with them. It was a new technology, certainly regulation, compliance aspects to that as well. But there was just a ton of demand. So out of college, this was kind of a direction that I really took to pretty quickly. I was in that space for about 11 years, so really kind of in depth, long path, right? So that gave me a background in a lot of interesting things like RF engineering, but also wireless security. And over time, those kind of particulars became a common thing for general network practitioners, and I saw less of a demand in the networking space. And I really kind of took some time to look around. And even at that point, when I wasn't in security or compliance, um, I could read the news, right? And every day almost it seemed like another breach or another incident. So the security space was someplace where I thought would be interesting and I thought would have a lot of demand. And lo and behold, an opportunity opened up for me at CyberArk, and I really jumped on it. I dove in, so to speak, and that's kind of been the story ever since. Tons of demand, right? I think I see similar things in the security space as I saw in that wireless niche in the networking market back in the mid 2000s. Is there's a ton of demand, and there certainly is not enough resources to go around. So that's really kind of my transition into security. Once I landed at CyberArk, really, I'm not a security generalist by any means. As I came from another industry and really kind of learned based on the experience that I've gained, all at CyberArk, I'm really focused on privileged access security and identity security now. So I wouldn't even say that, I'm a security practitioner. In fact, I'm not a security practitioner. I'm not a compliance practitioner. I'm kind of in between the two, and we see demand at CyberArk from buyers on both sides of that spectrum. So that's a little bit of background on me. Personally, I'm based out of the Northeast in the U.S., Boston area, and got two beautiful kids, family man, and enjoy activities like fishing.
Ooh, what kind of fishing?
So I'm right on the coast of Massachusetts. Two main types of fish that we go after. Well, maybe three. Ground fish, which is cod, haddock, striped bass, and the big one out there, bluefin tuna.
Okay, so you're talking deep sea fishing or fishing in the big water.
Yeah, yep. Not too far
Gotcha.
out, but definitely in the big water.
Gotcha. Not that this is a show about fishing or anything, but some people might want to know.
I could potentially make it into one.
We could, but
what
we
fish
might
do you
lose some.
use for your passwords?
Halibut. 1, 2, 3. Well, so you do have sort of an interesting perspective that you're bringing to the table, being focused so much on privilege, and that's kind of an interesting thing, and we're going to obviously dive into that a little bit more throughout the show. But we like to ask all of our guests the same, what we call the hot seat questions. So if you're ready, there's no right or wrong answer. We're just simply looking for your perspective so we get to know you a little bit. But, where do you fall or how do you see the world? What is your view on this thing that we call the security versus compliance continuum?
Yeah. Great question. I've heard it before, and I've heard some of the answers to it before, and wow, people really go down kind of a rat hole with this question, and you get all kinds of different responses. I think I started alluding to kind of how I fall in the spectrum or this continuum, in that I'm not really a security practitioner. I'm not a compliance practitioner, so I see both equally, right? And I have respect for both sides. It's really easy to say that compliance isn't security. I think we hear security isn't compliance a lot less, but they're obviously very, very tightly related. And what I see is sort of this cyclical cycle between the two. And we always focus on, or we always think about the cycle where compliance is bringing needs to the security teams. We don't think about it as much when we think about the sort of the overarching regulation and kind of the build out of those regulations. In security, bringing that information and sort of the technical depth and new direction to the regulation, right? So I see it as very cyclical. I see one of my biggest pet peeves is really kind of looking at it as a versus, right? Security
Right.
versus compliance, and because that's not looking at it in the right way. Just like I don't know every bit of technology that we interact with to the depth of people that come to me and need to put privileged access or security around those technologies. Both of those teams aren't fully aware of what the other teams, uh, uh, aren't as in depth with each other's responsibilities as each other, but they need to work together very tightly to be able to get to the goal. And I think that's where we're not entirely aligned, right? The goal is really reduction of risk of the organization, and I think that's where the two teams really can come together and focus the energies is overall reduction of risk within the organization. So I don't like it as opposing teams. They are very much on the same team. They're just tackling the problem from some different directions. So I think that's probably it from my perspective on security versus compliance. Probably to summarize, one of my biggest pet peeves is the fact that we always look at it as, not always, but sometimes look at it as adversarial when we say versus.
Mhm.
They're really on the same team, right? They're fighting the same causes. They're just doing it in slightly different ways.
Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons why we put this show together is because we've seen and heard so much of this adversarial, frankly, it's a bunch of misconceptions that one silo has versus the other. And we're trying to educate both sides to, hey, we're all in this together, we're all doing the same thing. So I'm curious, your perspective. You mentioned quite a few things there. Uh, Tell us a little bit about CyberArk, but also I'm curious in telling us about CyberArk, and as a solutions engineer, I'm assuming you're customer facing or prospect facing fairly often. I'm curious, just to respond initially to your view of our hot seat question. Who's the typical customer that you're talking to? Are they people that are coming from the security team? Are they people coming from the compliance team or other teams? And or what's the mix? How does that look?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we've evolved, and we've evolved based on the demand that we're seeing. I think our
Hmm.
typical buyer today is from the security side. And I think we've seen a little bit of a change in that it was a more direct relationship from the compliance buyer. That seems to be filtering through the security teams, and the people that we're selling to are predominantly on the security side, being directed by compliance teams if there is a
Mm.
compliance driver to it. But we're starting to
Right.
see a massive shift. When CyberArk, before I was at CyberArk, I think there was more compliance driven sales, and I think today the direction is more risk reduction based sales, with the potential benefit of doing things from a client's perspective more efficiently. So, to kind of summarize, I think it's changed over time. CyberArk has really adapted to the security mindset, the risk reduction mindset. We all the time say we're security first. You very rarely hear an organization say they're compliance first. And I think that's kind of following where the buyer comes from today. The security buyer tends to go a little bit deeper and want to understand the whys, right? Why are we doing this? What's the problem at depth?
Hmm.
Whereas kind of the compliance need is really pretty obvious, right? We need to solve this particular problem. Does your product solve this problem? Great. Security team takes that and says, I think CyberArk can solve this problem. what else can it do for me? And that's when we tend to go into more depth on matching the solution to the need.
Gotcha. So CyberArk sounds like it's been around a while. For the benefit of our audience that may not be familiar with CyberArk, and just give us a real quick elevator pitch. What CyberArk does, what kind of solutions you bring to the table.
Yeah. So I don't know. Our CEO jokes a little bit that we're a 20-year overnight success. It's sort of been a long time in coming, building up the product to really where we are today, and it's evolved over time. So for those that aren't familiar, CyberArk is massively focused on preventing the misuse of privileged access, and really that comes in a bunch of different forms and factors. Today, we're looking to expand that vision into identity security as a whole, looking at any identity, any access method from anywhere, and taking it all with a security first approach. If folks have some familiarity with CyberArk and don't work with us all the time, they probably think of us from the PAM side, privileged access management. And this is really the heart and soul of what CyberArk does. Privileged access management is your traditional credential vaulting, putting on top automation, so credential rotation automations, using privileged accounts in smarter ways, session brokering, being able to identify applications before they actually have the ability to use privileged access and privileged credentials. That's really the basis of what CyberArk is about. But it also extends in some different ways into remote administration. So kind of solving the problem that a lot of us are facing today, and that we're all kind of sitting at home in our home offices and not on the corporate network. How do we get an administrator in front of the systems that they need to make changes on quickly? This whole concept of least privilege, which certainly is not a tool, it's a concept or a principle, but there's also tools that overlay to make it more functional, right? Giving you least privileges on systems that don't natively support something like least privilege, namely Windows, Mac-based systems. And even extending out into the identity security space, providing identity assurance. We could call it multi-factor or two-factor, but it really boils down to a control that needs to be in place before any of the things that CyberArk does are really going to be valid, which is certification of the user before we hand them the administrative access that we're protecting. So all those things come into play. There are just about every regulation out there has some aspect of protecting identity and protecting privileged access. So really kind of our technologies are going to mix into the particular regulation that you're looking or framework that you're looking to adhere to.
I have one more question, and then I'll throw you to the wolves. And this is not meant to be a trick question, but hopefully it's not a trick question. What is the difference, and and which side does CyberArk sort of lean towards, if any? What's the difference between authorization and authentication when it comes to privileged access?
Yeah, I think it really breaks down to your identity, right? Your identity is what's going to authenticate you. And that's very distinct from authorization. Authorization is what you should have rights to. So both of those parts come together, and even in AAA systems with the ability to audit all that, and that certainly has compliance needs to be able to audit everything that somebody does in that AAA picture. But authentication is really identifying who you're talking to, right? Whether it's a human user, whether it's an application, that human user or that application has an identity, and that authentication is certifying that identity to the greatest extent we can, right? And that's really kind of the strong authentication picture. Authorization is really the granularity of rights that identity should have within the organization, right? That's role-based access control. That's least privilege inside that authorization side.
Gotcha. Gentlemen, any questions for Matt?
Ooh. Hey Matt, how you doing? John
Go ahead,
Snyder. John. I come in from a little bit different perspective, being a trial lawyer and technologist. And I wonder, just broadly speaking, we've had this COVID experience where everybody has learned very quickly to work remotely. And many organizations that I talk to have observed that we've made a shift from office environment to remote environment that would have probably taken 5 to 7 years of planning, and we did it in about 2 weeks. What sort of ramifications or complications, if any, have you encountered with your clients in this incredibly rapid evolution from business being done at an office to hundreds or even thousands of employees working on their own hardware and working remotely? How has that played out for your organization?
Yeah, well, for my organization, it begins, at home within the company itself, and we're facing the same challenges that all other companies are facing. In that, the need to have secure access to your applications and systems has really ratcheted up exponentially. The things that we were thinking about before, and the things that were on, billboards at trade shows, are becoming reality right now, because the concept of zero trust access was something that vendors were typically floating around out there as the ideal method going forward. But as soon as COVID hit and everybody's working at home, we've really flipped the switch, because VPN solutions are massively overtaxed. We're trying to get applications pushed out that don't require users to be on the VPN to be functional. We can no longer rely on the perimeter-based authorization, that or authentication that we had previously relied on, right? We fell back to those things. So the concepts that CyberArk has always worked under is zero trust, right? When we're talking about privileged access, there's really should be no concept of an existing trust. So what we're kind of seeing a shift into is more reliance on stronger multi-factor authentication or authentication assurance. We've kind of adapted that with the acquisition of a new business that's going to help us really leap forward pretty quickly with regard to that strong authentication. The company is called Adaptive, and we're really kind of building it into what we had started with a technology called Alero for passwordless authentication, and really going to be able to expand pretty rapidly with that acquisition. I will also say that one of the things that's got the most attention from CyberArk, actually, I'll talk about two things in the shift post COVID that we've really seen: the importance of protecting the endpoint. Because the attack point is still the human being, right? That's going to be the easiest initiation of the attack point. And now we have all these human beings in front of laptops that are off the corporate network, outside the perimeter. They're more susceptible to attack when they have that one less control around them. So endpoint protection solution, endpoint least privileges technologies have really kind of ratcheted up in demand. And also this concept of remote administration, right? Which is kind of facilitating the access to your privileged systems in a faster, more streamlined way without relying on VPN. As an administrator, I'd have a very diverse work-life balance today, right? A lot of our organizations are coming to us and saying that our administrators are working all hours of the day. They don't necessarily want to be on VPN all the time when they need to go in and restart a service or do a simple task. They're trying to do it while they're having dinner with their family. And that's kind of the reality of business right now, is that our lives are really intertwined with business right now. So being able to put an administrator in front of the capability to make that quick change and then get back to what he's doing has been really interesting to our customers. So this whole concept of remote administration without the need to fire up a VPN, doing it from wherever you are, any device, accessing any system, has really kind of captured the attention of a lot of our customers and prospects as well.
So, hi Matt, Scott here. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Hey, Scott.
You're speaking very heavily about PAM, right? Privileged access management, and that's a key component of what CyberArk does, right? However, with PAM, there are common mistakes for configuration that companies don't account for, whether they're using CyberArk or not. right? And some of these mistakes fall into the realm of compliance, right? So the first one is failing to discover all privileged access accounts, right? The second one is not properly provisioning, right? At least the way that I'm going to roll this out, right? So taking both of those into account, when does somebody want to use CyberArk for account access management, and when do they not want to use it?
Yeah. Great question, right? And this is a challenge that all of our customers and that anybody really adapting a PAM strategy will have to answer, right? How to go about it, how to tackle the problem, because it's not a solution that we're going to drop in and overnight the problem is going to go away. There needs to be a strategy behind how you tackle the privileged access management problem. And that comes down to being able to discover accounts, understand what's out there, avoid misconfigurations. But one of the root problems under all of that is really figuring out what to do first, right? We can't go in and control all privileged access overnight. We need to kind of look at the problem in a way that's more easily digestible. And this is one of the main advantages that CyberArk has as a company. We've been doing this the longest, right? We've basically invented the space. So we've developed strategies that we've seen work for our customers, and we've been able to kind of communicate that in more effective ways with some prescriptive guidance. It really, to me, comes down to identifying what to do first based on risk factors. Certainly, compliance drivers can come into effect, right? Where we need to, change default passwords, or we need to do various things to really kind of satisfy compliance. But for me, it's more of a risk-based approach, right? And there's no better way to think about how to tackle that or how to prioritize than shifting your mindset, right? And we talk about thinking like the attacker. And this is where we kind of regain the advantage because there's a lot out there. There's a lot of tools that can be used against us, right? And what I mean by that is privileged accounts that can be turned back against us because that's what attackers do. They steal our administrators' access and they blend in and then they use it back against us. What can really kind of reverse?
Hold on, time out. So that's not just for the administrator accounts, though, right? That's also system accounts. Are system accounts something that CyberArk deals with on a very regular basis? And does CyberArk do it well?
Absolutely, right? All of those are applicable. And kind of where I was going was whatever the risk is that account carries is how you should prioritize it. And the way that I think about it is if you were attacking your own business and I gave you one account that you could have for free to start with, what account would you take? And that's a really quick way to kind of get to the point of what am I going to do first? And once you've protected that account, whether it's a service identity that carries domain admin on it, whether it's a infrastructure as a service console account that carries massive power to basically control the entire platform, you just go on to the next one. You rinse and repeat. That's the best way to tackle it. It doesn't matter if it's an interactive account that an actual human being uses to administer systems, an account that is used by a control plane, like a security orchestration or automation platform, like an Ansible Puppet Chef. They carry a lot of power because we have more and more systems and less humans controlling them. So those control points carry a ton of power and should certainly be prioritized as well.
So, in the Discord chat, we had a really good question come up, and it's extremely timely for what you're saying, right? And I'm going to read it verbatim. What is worse in an automated solution? Passwords are injected into applications generally as environment variables, flat files, or command line starting process, right? Assuming an attacker has access to the machine, and even if they are using a password manager, the attacker has everything in the application instance to connect with anything that container or app has access to. So, which is the best, considering most are only 2 or 3 steps away from each other?
So the best bet is not to inject it, right? To allow the application to either call it at runtime. So the application never caches it, never has direct access on the file system to that credential. It's going to call it via an API, and it's going to be authenticated every time that it calls that credential. So that's one good way to do it, and I would say that that's good. There's an even better way to do it.
CyberArk is set up for the APIs to be able to do this type of call what is it? This type of routine?
Absolutely. Yep. So just like humans that need to access credentials, applications need to access credentials as well. The main avenue of an application accessing a credential is via an API call. And there's a number of different APIs and SDKs that we have available, and a variety of different authentication methods that we can use to securely identify the application before handing it the credential that it's going to use.
Okay, cool. Jeff?
Interesting. I've got so many PCI related questions, and they will evolve around our topic for the second segment, which is the idea of least privilege. I want to drill down on that, at least to start off with, and want to learn more about how CyberArk does all this stuff. Let's take a break, and we'll be back in a minute to continue the conversation.